Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, after a tough end of the series in Miami against the Marlins, I'm going to tell you why I think the fifth starter problem with the Phillies rotation right now, majorly overrated. I'll tell you why on today's episode of Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for checking us out today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been over at 97.5 The Fanatic doing sports talk radio here in Philly for 5 years. This is my third year as a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member, and this is also my third season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, hitting the subscribe button on the YouTube. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It helps you keep up with Locked On Phillies. It takes like 2 seconds, costs you nothing. It really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies to help us continue to put out some good content for you as the Philly season continues. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The NFL season kicking off this past weekend, so go ahead and get in on that deal for our friends over at FanDuel. But of course, the Phillies, they were not quiet just because the NFL was going on. No, well, they were quiet, but not by choice. They played down in Miami, and they end up splitting the series 2 games apiece with the Miami Marlins, which it happens, but it's a failure compared to the expectations. You should not split series with that team. You should not lose series to that team. You should win every series that you face the Miami Marlins. You just should. I don't think that's unfair expectations. So, no, I'm not happy with how it went down. I'm not happy with how the Philadelphia Phillies played Saturday and Sunday and back-to-back losses. No, not good for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, it's not something to freak out about, right? Because of where they're at in the standings. And with the final month of the season underway in September, I was really rolling. It's already September 9th. They still have the second best record in baseball. They're a game off the pace set by the Los Angeles Dodgers. They're 3 games up on the Brewers. There are 7 games up on the Mets and the Braves, who are tied for second in the National League East right now. So part of this conversation is going to be the fact that in the standings, they're in a good spot. But something that was a real sticking point for a lot of people, like the offense is going to be fine. We know they're going to be okay. They're going to have their hot days, their cold days, whatever. Nola's going to be okay. I'm not worried about his game. He's going to have starts where he isn't at his best, and the Phillies aren't going to win out. Like, they're not going to win out the rest of the season. They're not going to win out in the postseason. Hopefully now they win series and advance to the World Series. That would be ideal, but I'm not looking at this team as like they're unstoppable. Nobody's going to beat them in a single game. That's an unfair expectation. So part of this, you just kind of have to say, okay, they're going to lose games. It's going to happen. How do you bounce back? Why are you losing them? And yesterday, there was a clear reason why you lost that game. Seth Johnson, who made his major league debut after being acquired by the Phillies from the Orioles ahead of the trade deadline this year, he gets called up to make a start in that 5th spot in the rotation. And he gave up 9 earned runs in 2 1/3 innings pitched. Absolutely flat out miserable. And everybody was losing their mind about the 5th spot in the rotation. It was supposed to be Taiwan Walker. Then he went down and it became Spencer Turnbull. And then Taiwan Walker comes back and it's Taiwan Walker again. And then he goes on the injured list because he stunk. And then it was Spencer Turnbull again. And then Spencer Turnbull goes down. And then you're dealing with either Michael Mercado or Tyler Phillips. You threw a bullpen game with a Ryan Kerkering at one point in that spot. You call up Seth Johnson. You haven't been able to figure out a 5th spot in the rotation for a lot of the season. Now, mostly the person that's on is Taiwan Walker for not living up to the contract, being the guy you expect him to be. He has put you in that spot. He's not even good out of the bullpen right now. He's unusable. We're done past the Taiwan Walker thing. You can't put him on the postseason roster. He's not an asset to this team. But it's not just about him, right? I've seen this narrative start to build over the past couple weeks with what's going on with the 5th spot in the Philadelphia Phillies rotation. And I think it's honestly it's short-sighted. I'm not going to call it dumb. It's short-sighted because there's some validity to it. It's really bad what the Philadelphia Phillies have been able to do in that 5th starter spot this year. It's been majorly underachieving, especially compared to Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, and Sanchez, who have been largely your top 4 pitchers for most of the year, even though Ranger had an injured list stint there for a little bit. Here's the problem. To everyone out there saying, this is on Dave Debrowski. He didn't do enough at the deadline. He should have acquired a fifth starter. He should have gone out and traded for somebody and added somebody to the team so that you don't have to deal with this, with the fifth spot in the rotation, because you're giving away games. And that is a somewhat valid concern, that you're giving away games in that fifth spot in the rotation. Let me tell you why this problem is majorly overrated. I'm going to start with, if you're someone who has that opinion, you've probably heard this rebuttal to it multiple times. The fifth starter is not going to throw in the postseason. You need 4 guys for the postseason. You have Wheeler, you have Nola, you have Suarez, you have Sanchez. Those are your 4 starting pitchers for October. The 5th guy in the rotation would not have mattered once you got to October. So this is a problem that exists only in the regular season, right? Anyone who thinks that this is going to cost them and kill their chances of winning the World Series, you're flat out wrong. I'm sorry. I don't say that very often. Normally it would be, I understand where you're coming from, but here's why I disagree. No, you're just wrong. They're not going to pitch a 5th guy in the starting rotation in the postseason. And that's ultimately what matters, because we know the Philadelphia Phillies are going to be a playoff team. We know it. They're going to be a playoff team. So that means the problem exists in the regular season. Now you look at what you're trying to accomplish in the regular season. And while you are in a tight race near the top of the standings for seeding, let's be realistic about what this team is capable of doing. You don't want to give games away, right? You never want to give games away. You definitely don't want to in September. You want to win as many games as you can. That's the name of the sport, right? Unless you're an owner that doesn't care about winning. And we're lucky that we don't have one of those in Philadelphia. John Middleton cares a lot. It's not a money thing that they don't have a 5th starter. It's a need thing, and it's a prospects thing. But where they are right now in the National League East, they're 7 games up on the Braves and the Mets. Now, they play a good number of games against the Mets. 2 more series to go against New York the rest of the way. So keep an eye on that and see if things change. But right now, let's just do the math. The 5th starter through yesterday. The Philadelphia Phillies have a record of 85 and 88. 85 and 88. Sorry, 85 and 58. It would be really bad if they're 85 and 88, because that would mean that they're over the amount of games that they're supposed to play. But they played 143 games out of 162. That means you have 19 games remaining. Divide that by 5, and you get 3.8. Let's call it 4, right? Let's just round up and call it 4. You're going to need 4 more games out of 19 from that 5th starter. And then it's done, and the narrative doesn't exist anymore. You have such a big lead. Let's say you go out and you lose every single one of those 4 starts. Well, the Brewers are 3 games back on you. That would be enough for them to catch you if everything else works out their way. But you'd still win the NL East and not be able to put it on that 5th spot in the rotation. Other guys are going to have to step up, but that's what you expect anyway. 4 more starts the rest of the year. A team that's playing well like the Philadelphia Phillies have been lately since they've come out of the slump, you should be able to withstand this. This team should be talented enough. It's not ideal to give games away, but you needed outfield help. You needed bullpen help. They went out and they accomplished that. They added Carlos Estevez. They added Tanner Banks. They added Austin Hayes. They got guys that seem to be able to help you at the major league level when they're healthy. We're going to talk about injuries, and Austin Hayes is part of that. A scary situation with Austin Hayes right now. But bottom line is, the 5th spot in the rotation, sure. Could you have won a couple more games? Great. But where does that put you? There's only 1 more spot to go up in the standings, and you're only a game back of the Dodgers right now. The Phillies could still catch the Dodgers for the top seed in the National League and best record in baseball when everything's all said and done. And if they don't, well, they just have to stay ahead of the Brewers, who, again, are 3 games back of them, in order to find a way to that first-round bye, which is ultimately one of the major goals. I don't think we came into this season saying the Phillies are going to win the National League top seed. That didn't feel like a realistic expectation with the Dodgers doing what they did this offseason and with the Braves being such a good team. And now, obviously, we know things have changed over the course of the season. But if they are to win the division and get a first-round bye, it is mission freaking accomplished for the regular season, folks. I know how good they looked at points. I know how bad they've looked at points. What it evens out to is, if you can be a top 2 seed, you give yourself a good look at having an easy path, as easy as it does get in baseball, because we know in baseball nothing's guaranteed, but as easy of a path as you can give yourself in the regular season to find a way to an NL pennant, a World Series appearance, and hopefully a World Series win. So that's why I think this conversation is overrated. Ultimately, we're talking about 4 more baseball games, and that's if they lose all of them. Maybe you run into a game where, I don't know, you get a miraculous start, like Tyler Phillips threw a complete game shutout earlier this year. There's capabilities for guys to go out there and have surprisingly good games, or you could go out and, like how the Phillies scored a ridiculous amount of runs against the Marlins in a game in this series over the weekend, 16 in game 2, that you go out and have one of those days. Like, weird things happen. At the end of the day, those 4 games should not be the difference between you winning or losing the division, making the playoffs, or finding your way to the 2 seed. And I'm not guaranteeing that they're the 2 seed or the 1 seed or a first round bye. I'm just saying that this is kind of like the conversation about Rojas at the plate earlier on in the year, where it's like, if Johan Rojas doesn't hit, how do you play him? Well, because Bryce Harper's supposed to hit, and Kyle Schwarber, and Trey Turner, and JT Realmuto, and Nick Castellanos, and Alec Bohm, and Bryson Stott, and Brandon Marsh, and all these other guys are supposed to hit. Johan Rojas is there defensively. That's the goal for that player. The 5th spot in the rotation, your job is to survive. Your job is to do what you can do to get out there and not completely ruin the Phillies' chances of winning a baseball game, but it only exists for 4 more starts, and it should not be the difference, because Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, and Sanchez should give you good enough looks at winning enough ball games that you can survive this. So everybody take a deep breath. I don't think it's going to kill the Phillies. It's annoying that every 5th day is that. I understand if you don't want to watch on those days, you don't want to go down the ballpark on those days. I get it, because it puts them at a significant disadvantage in those games. Ultimately, I do not believe that it will end up mattering. And that's why Dave Debrowski didn't address it at the deadline, because short-term solutions, yeah, they can be helpful for the regular season if you need it. The Phillies didn't need it at the time. I don't believe they need it now. That's where I'm at. Hopefully I'm not proven wrong, but I feel strongly about that. So hopefully that's calming for people to hear my thoughts on that. Or maybe you think I'm insane. You can let me know in the comments. Something that's not calming is what we're going to talk about coming up next. There have been some injury problems for the Philadelphia Phillies, and while they're dodging bullets, they're not completely unscathed. We'll talk about what's going on with some big-time names that are unavailable for the Phils right now, when they'll be expected back, and the level of concern for each of those injuries as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook first, because you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we got something a little bit different going on for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. If you watch football all day yesterday like I did, you know how important it is to be able to catch all the games, how entertaining it can be. Go ahead and check it out. And, oh, by the way, if that's not enough, FanDuel also has something special for our listeners this weekend. Go ahead and be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's double your winnings for all of the Sunday coming games, right? Pre-game money line bets, go ahead and check that out. Profit Boost will be live starting on Friday. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. They're doing a lot of great stuff, so check them out. FanDuel. All right, we have some injury updates for the Philadelphia Phillies, because it was not the perfect weekend. JT Realmuto fouled a ball off his knee. We're still not seeing Alec Bohm play. We got a lot of stuff going on. Edmundo Sosa was placed on the injured list with back spasms. Austin Hayes has got a kidney infection going on. We're going to break down all of these level of concern-wise. Shout out to Phillies Nation. Tim Kelly, Destiny Legardo, a couple folks who do great work over there. I'm running through an article by them with a little information in it just to make sure I'm hitting all the storylines. So I'm using some of their content. I want to give them some love. They do some great work. Go ahead and check out Phillies Nation. But let's start with, in the order they have it, Edmundo Sosa, which is the most recent of the injuries. He was placed on the injured list yesterday with back spasms. It's the 10-day injured list. Back spasms are kind of weird, but they're normally not a long-term absence from the team. It's more of a rest, recover, get some treatment done, get to a place where you're feeling better. Edmundo Sosa is a depth piece. So with Alec Bohm out, he's a little bit more valuable for this team. But in the grand scheme of things, he's a guy that you need healthy to play like 1 or 2 times in the postseason, maybe. A couple of pinch hit at bats here in certain spots if you need it, if games are tight. But he's not an everyday player. I'm not trying to say he's not important. He's had some really good stretches of the season. He is the Phillies 2024 Heart and Hustle Award winner. Like, I love Edmundo Sosa. I think he's a very good baseball player. But it shouldn't kill you to have him out. and you don't need him every day in the postseason. So hopefully this is something that remedies itself soon. This looms larger with the Alec Bohm hand injury, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But Edmundo Sosa, I'd expect him to be good for the postseason. I expect him to be good before the regular season is over. It just sucks you don't have him right now. It was retro to September 7th, so the earliest day he can come back, September 17th. Let's move on to JT Realmuto, who missed a couple games, sore left knee, out of the lineup currently, not on the injured list. He said he was feeling significantly better after fouling a ball off his left knee. It was in the game on the 6th. So the Phillies gave him a couple days, and he's going to be okay. It's just like it's a bruise. And sometimes when you get a bruise and you're sore, you just got to let your body recover. Just similar to the back spasm setup. I'm not expecting an injured list stint for Realmuto. I'm not expecting that at all. The Phillies aren't expecting that either. He should be back sooner rather than later. The Phillies could really use that because we know how big of a drop-off it is when Garrett Stubbs is in the game compared to JT. But because he had that surgery on one of his knees and the wear and tear of the catcher position can be tough, you give him the extra bit of time, make sure he's good. You can't lose JT Realmuto for the postseason. Garrett Stubbs catching every game in October would be a nightmare. Rafael Marchand and Garrett Stubbs splitting time would be a nightmare. And I don't mean that as disrespectful to those players. I mean it more out of respect for how good JT Realmuto can be when he's in the lineup. So not a major issue, something to keep an eye on. Hopefully something very minor that will lead to him coming back. He may play tonight against the Rays. We'll talk about that game or the series against the Rays, all 3 games, and tonight's game specifically as well, coming up in our final segment. Now let's get to the interesting ones, right? And not in a good way. Alec Bohm has been placed on the 10-day injured list. We talked about it in Friday's episode. I say he's not on the IL yet. He's taking a little bit more time, but hopefully he'll be back this weekend. He's got some swelling in his hand. Well, now the injured list, that's not great. Now, worst case scenario is the hamate bone, which is a bone like kind of close to your thumb. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm like pointing to the area right now where I know some people who have had that injury. It's surgically repaired. It takes a while to come back from. It would probably be a season-ending injury for Alec Bohm if he had gotten that one. The Phils dodged a bullet that it wasn't that. But they haven't completely, again, come out unscathed, like I said, leading into this segment. Alec Bohm is a big loss. He's a guy that's up there in doubles in baseball. I believe he's still leading the league in doubles. He was a big RBI guy in the first half of the season. He's solid over there at third base. He's a big player on this team, an all-star starter. You need Alec Bohm if the ceiling of this team is going to be reached. That's why you got to be careful because, again, just like the 5th spot in the rotation, these regular season games, they pale in comparison to the value that you should put in postseason games. You don't want to rush him back, which is why the Phillies are being cautious with this, but also the 10-day injured list makes me feel like, this is dragging on a little bit. I'm starting to get a little bit nervous about Alec Bohm. Hopefully he'll be back when his 10-day injured list stint is over. That is retro to September 3rd, so he could come back on the 13th in 4 days. 4 days? Yeah, 4 days. So we'll see if he ends up finding his way back in the lineup that soon, if it's longer than that, but we'll keep an eye on Alec Bohm. That sucks that it's longer than we thought. It's still better than worst case scenario, but that's something that I'm looking at and I'm saying the sooner Alec Bohm can come back, you kind of got to put him out there because he's a guy that really does help the Philadelphia Phillies win baseball games. Not that JT Realmuto's not, but JT it's a minor thing. He should be back soon. The last one we'll talk about, this one's a little bit scary. Austin Hayes has a kidney infection. He took antibiotics for it, according to Rob Thompson. He felt worse. Don't know what's going on. Like, he's back here in Philadelphia. He was not on the road trip with the team. Austin Hayes has had a tough go, man. He had a hamstring thing right after being acquired by the Phillies. Now he's got this kidney infection. Tough stretch for him. He's an important piece. He was your big outfield move at the trade deadline. You need him in the lineup. I think he makes this lineup so much more balanced. He'll have rough stretches because he is what he is, a bottom of the lineup outfielder. But when he's in, he balances out the Marsh-Rojas equivalent so they don't have to play because both of those guys have their deficiencies at points, even though they have their moments as well. Hayes makes this team significantly more balanced at the bottom of the lineup. He is currently out on the 10-day injured list, retro to September 2nd. And that kidney infection, I don't know, man. It's not a soreness in the hand. It's not soreness in the knee. This is could be a serious medical problem. I don't know how long that's going to be. There's no real time frame for it because that's, I don't know. It's like if I break my finger, a doctor's going to tell me, hey, rest it, splint it, We'll do all this stuff. It heals in this X amount of time. Then we'll work your way back. Infections are weird. They can leave. They can come back. They can get worse. They can, like, out of nowhere if certain factors are in play. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor, but everyone's had an infection before. Everyone knows how tricky they can be. And that keeping them out, that is no bueno for the Philadelphia Phillies. And wishing the best for Austin Hayes, hoping he feels better. Like, I don't really feel for guys when they like JT Realmuto bruise his knee, Alec Bohm hand swelling. Like, I want him to get back, but I'm not like, I'm worried. Like, this Austin Hayes thing does worry me a little bit for the person, not even just the player. So wishing him the best, and the Phillies could really use him. That's the one that I'm most worried about right now because, frankly, it's the unknown, and that scares me a little bit. Spencer Turnbull's working his way back. That's the only other one listed here. There's a couple other guys that are minor league guys, but Spencer Turnbull's working his way back. He could be back before the end of the season. The Phils are non-committal on whether or not he'll pitch again this year. If so, it'll be in a relief role. A little bit is a smaller thing, but some people might have heard injury update and then like, what's going on with Turnbull? Because we haven't talked about him in months, it feels like, and that's accurate, I'd say. Maybe he'll be back. Maybe he won't. Not banking on it. We'll see. If he does, great. If not, you got to survive it. That's something we've kind of understood since he went on the 60-day injured list to begin with. But those are some injury updates and the levels of concern that I currently have with him. And I think Phillies fans should echo the levels that I'm at, or at least that's my opinion. Feel free to disagree. But whatever the case, the Phillies are going to keep playing baseball games. And they start a 3-game series against the Rays where they really need to kind of bounce back from those 2 straight losses that they had against the Marlins. They have a chance to, though, because the Rays, not that good of a baseball team. We'll talk about how the Phillies get it done and if they can win this series coming up as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. But let's talk about eBay Motors first, because passion, drive, and patience, those are the keys to the formula for winning championships. And it's also what keeps your vehicle alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They got superchargers, they got roof racks, they got exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered on all of those fronts. They got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. So you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time and your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. They got all the parts you need at the prices that you want. So it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's get into this Rays series. And real quick, I want to thank you one more time for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, Sully, he's the best. Does great work on the Locked On MLB podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. It's more of an overarching baseball podcast on everything going on around the majors. So a good way to keep up on playoff races in these times. If you want to check that out after you do the Phillies content, your favorite team, hear about some other teams, nowhere better to get it from than Paul Francis Sullivan. So check out Sully on the Locked On MLB podcast. Check out the Phillies tonight against the Rays at 6:40 p.m. with Christopher Sanchez on the mound facing off against Cole Sulser. Cole Sulser has made one career start before the start he's making tonight. He has a 4.35 ERA and 10 1/3 innings pitched in the season so far this year. The Phillies should absolutely take advantage. And righty, go get him. Please, for the love of all that is holy, don't give me another one of these. We don't know this guy. He's only had a handful of innings at the major league level. Actually, he's had over 100 at the major league level, but only ever made one career start. Don't you dare go out there and be in a situation where it's like, oh, that guy's going to take advantage. And also, you're probably looking at, because the Rays like to do that bullpen game or the opener, you won't see a lot of Cole Sulser, but you'll see an interesting strategy. You should be able to take advantage, especially when you have Christopher Sanchez on the mound with a 1.26 whip and a 3.45 ERA. Sanchez is a really good pitcher, has been all year. He has his ups and downs, but he's pretty darn consistently giving you good starts, or at least winnable starts. So I feel good about that pitching matchup. More on tonight's game in a second, but the pitching matchups for the rest of the series. Tomorrow, you're going to get Ranger Suarez facing off against Taj Bradley. Might be in attendance for that game. Might find my way down to the bank for that one. Want to see Ranger throw. And then the final game of the series, you've got Zach Wheeler on the mound against Shane Batts. And you've got the pitching advantage in every single one of these matchups. You have a significant advantage in each of these matchups according to the ESPN analytics. I mean, tonight, for example, the Phillies are minus 205 on the money line. They have a 75.2% chance to win according to ESPN analytics. They got to take advantage of this game where they're the better team, in this series where they're the better team. You should win this series over the Rays. You should win at least 2 games. Hey, maybe even sweep. Sanchez, Suarez, Wheeler, that's pretty good 3 men throwing on the mound for you. Go out there and get it if you're the Philadelphia Phillies and find a way to buffer that lead before you play the Mets coming up. Your next series will be, I believe, let me confirm that. Yeah, the New York Mets for 3 games at Citizens Bank Park starting Friday. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But remember how we talked about, right? Because the Mets are in the same spot as the Braves now. They're both 7 games back of the Phillies. I don't think the Mets are as good of a team as the Braves, but the record says that they are. And maybe with the injuries, I'm overvaluing what I think the Braves should be. Bottom line is, we talked about when the Phillies played the Astros ahead of a big 4-game series with the Braves. I thought momentum from that Astros series is going to be important for the Braves series. Win 2 out of 3, we're feeling good. Lose the series, the sky's falling, and it's a cold building there at Citizens Bank Park for that series against the Braves. They ended up winning the series against the Astros and then winning 3 of 4 from Atlanta. Same thing with this Rays series. It's not a big series in a vacuum, but seeing that the Mets are coming up next, you want to build that buffer. You want to build momentum. You want to roll into that series with one of your division rivals feeling really, really hot. And you want to carry that because it's the Brewers next after that, and then the Mets for 4 more. This is your last inconsequential series of the season. Because even though you finish out with Cubs, Nationals, those are going to be spots where you're fighting for seeding, and you are going to be in your final 6 games of the season. Those always matter no matter who you're playing. So this is a really big one against the Rays. Even though it's not consequential from this specific perspective, it will be in the long run. You got to go out and have a good performance. And the guys that are going to be trying to stop you, just some names to keep an eye on. Jose Siri has 17 home runs for the Tampa Bay Rays. He's a solid power hitter, but he's only batting 188. Your other guy that you got to keep an eye on, Yandy Diaz. He leads the team in average and RBI, 64 ribbies, 279 average. But like, for example, Schwarber has 33 homers to Series 17. Trey Turner's batting 296 to Diaz's 279. Schwarber has 93 RBIs to Diaz's 64. The Phillies are a significantly better offensive team. The Rays are batting 231 as a team. They've been incredible when they've out-hit opponents. They're like 47-9 or something when they out-hit opponents. But by their record being 71-72, you can tell they don't do that all that often. So pitching's got to be good, but also you have the better offense. You should take advantage in this game. Who am I looking at to have big games? Well, if JT doesn't play, I'm not going to say Stubbs, don't worry. But if JT doesn't play, you're looking at having JT out, Bohm out, Sosa out. Your stars really have to step up because the margin for error is significantly thinner that you have behind you in the lineup. Schwarber's got to be really big, and he's been good lately. I mean, he's got 33 bombs, 93 RBIs on the year. He's batting 250. He's been really good in the leadoff spot. Trey Turner needs to have a big series. I would love to see that. But can we talk about Bryce Harper real quick, please? Like, I'm not worried about Bryce. He's been actually swinging the bat really well, but the power isn't there. I'm going to make a CT guarantee. I'm going to make a Connor Thomas guarantee, not on a game result, on a series result, and not by how the teams play. This is an individual one. Bryce Harper, I'm just double checking here, righty tomorrow, righty tonight, and in the final game of the series, a righty as well. Bryce Harper's going to go yard in this series. He's going to hit a home run. I'm guaranteeing it. He is going to hit a ball out of Citizens Bank Park at some point in this series and show that he still has that pop, and maybe it'll get him jump started. But we need to see a little bit of pop from him. Maybe we get it tonight. Maybe it's in game 2 or 3. But I'm telling you, he's going yard. I can just feel it in my bones, and the Phillies could really use that. And then you get what you get for the bottom of the lineup. I can't believe I haven't brought up Nick Castellanos yet, but Casty's got to be good. Stott's got to be good. Marsh's got to be good. Like, these guys have to step up. It goes from star players to the guys that normally play that become the valuable ones when you're missing a couple of starters. Now, hopefully JT will just play tonight and be fine, and the left knee soreness will be okay, and Alec Bohm will be back in a couple days, and then you could be in a situation where you say, oh, all right, we got everybody that we really need besides waiting for Austin Hayes to find his way back into the lineup. But for now, it's a little bit thin in the Phillies lineup. They need their big-time players to make big plays and big at-bats put together in this series. I still think Phils are winning at least 2 out of 3 against the Rays. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to break down what's going on from game 1 of that Rays series and see if we feel a little bit different about the Phils. If they lose 3 in a row and don't win tonight, there's going to be people who think they're starting to slide again. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But we're also going to look ahead to the rest of the series, and we're going to take a peek around baseball to see who's playing well right now, like who's trending in the right direction, because we're nearing that time when who's getting hot now affects potentially who's going to be hot in October. So we'll get into all of that on tomorrow's episode. But thank you again for checking us out here on Locked On Phillies. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to that YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Really helps us out. And I will talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.